Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. Welcome back to the channel. I get a lot of requests of how to weather prop weapons, okay? So today I'm working on a Mandalorian blaster from the Mandalorian show. And this was an earlier model. It's a 3D printed model, so it's really, really lightweight. And in the prop sort of biz, we call this a stuffer, okay? So this is meant to kind of fit into a holster and you know, just look like it's there. I can use it obviously for taking pictures and stuff like that, but it's not, you know, I didn't spend a ton of time on it, okay? So you can see some little, I don't know if you can see that on the camera there, but I didn't spend forever, you know, sanding out every little, you know, print line or things like that. I was rushing for a convention, and I just sort of needed to get something done as soon as possible. So, but this is fine. It works pretty good. This is a little bit of an older model. I think it was made by Stryker, and you can see here I painted the wood grip. Oh, sorry, I painted the wood grip just up to this point because that's kind of where I could see an indentation. And I've seen on more recent models that the wood grip actually goes up quite a bit higher. So I'm not sure if it's just newer photos and stuff like that, but you know, that's just where it is. So I'm fine. I'm not going to fix that, but I think it looks pretty good. What I did was I sanded the print, or I printed it, obviously, glued all the pieces together. I had a seam line down the middle of the blaster here where I kind of printed the top half, and then I printed the grip, you know, half. And I just used a bit of Bondo glazing putty to fill that, and I think it's pretty good, you know, it'll pass. And what I did was sand it down, 180 grit, 2 coats of Duplicolor filler primer, sand it with 400 grit, another couple coats, sand again with 600, and then my top coat. Now I know some people use you know, like a matte finish, a very flat black for their blasters. I tend to like more of a satin finish just because it kind of picks up the light a little bit better in photos. I find that if you use 100% kind of matte black, it sort of ends up being just this generic blob. You don't get to see all the edges. And yes, you are going to be highlighting them with weathering, but you know, I just like a little bit more luster to it, so I tend to use the satin. And then for the wood grain there, I just used acrylic. I actually spray painted this brown first, and then I just used a little brush and did a bunch of dry brush lines with like an orangey color and then a darker color, and that's kind of how I got the wood grain effect. Okay, so it's pretty straightforward. And then these details here, these are just gold Testors enamel that I just brush painted, and then this was I masked this off and then painted that with I think it was Duplicolor silver. Okay, so anyways, we're gonna get to weathering it. You just need a few simple things. This is like my fast weathering tutorial. Okay, I use Liquitex acrylic water-based paints. They work really, really well. It's a really good brand. I've used them for a long time. I'm using Mars Black and Burnt Umber, which I use in a lot of my weathering tutorials. So I just squeezed out a little blob here on this little scrap piece of plastic. You need a little bit of water, of course. I keep old brushes like this. Like you can see, this one's pretty kind of beat up. It's all flared and everything, but I love them for weathering, and I'm going to show you why in just a sec. Some paper towels, just in case you make a mess, and then an old sock. I like to keep old socks, and the main reason why is you can stick your hand in them and use them to wipe things and weather things, but if you take a sock, and you know, a sports sock anyways, and you flip it inside out, you've kind of got this fuzzy, kind of almost terry cloth like texture. So it's a great way to achieve texture on your prop. And this one I've already wetted down. I just soaked it, rinsed it under the tap, wrung all the water out so it's a little bit damp, and we're going to use that to rub the paint off after we're done our weathering. And then for the highlights, we're going to be using Rub N Buff, okay? So I brought 2 colors. I'm using one that's called Silver Leaf and one that's called Pewter. I'm probably only going to use the Pewter because I want the blaster to have a little bit more of an older look to it, so I don't really need like that bright silvery look. The pewter color will do. So Rub N Buff is a waxed base material. You can use it on sculptures and things, and basically, you know, as you warm it up and rub it, you can kind of create a metallic sheen or finish on whatever it is that you want to do. So let's get started. I'm going to wet my brush. Let's get this in the camera path here. There we go. And just wet my brush a little bit. You don't want a lot of water, okay? You just want a little bit wetting the brush. And then I'm going to mix, I'm going to mix about, you know, kind of all of the black and about half of the brown of that blob there. Now I only had about like a green pea sized blob of each, okay? It wasn't that much. Now the reason why I don't just use straight up black is because I find that that looks really generic, okay? Real things in the real world are rarely 100% black, okay? There's always kind of like a little bit of oil, a little bit of grease, and that usually has like a little bit of a warmer tone to it, okay? So you can see there I've got my black paint. I'm probably going to just add a touch more water to it. I don't want it very runny, okay? Because you don't want it running all over the place. We're not doing a black wash like a, what do you call it? You know, like when you're painting miniatures or something like that, or scale models. Okay, so you can see here, it's not running off, okay? It's not dripping off. That's not how, oops, that's not how wet it is. It's still almost like a, I don't know, thicker than honey kind of consistency, if that makes sense. So now that you've got it all smushed all over your brush, you're going to start dabbing this all over your blaster, okay? Now, you don't need to do it all over every surface. What you're trying to focus on is nooks and crannies, as I call them, okay? So everywhere that there is a deep recessed spot, you want to get this paint in there, okay? And what this is going to do is it's going to make it look a lot more like the dirt is settled into those areas, all right? So again, you don't need to do every surface. You also don't want to be brushing back and forth, okay? You don't want to go like that, because that's going to leave straight lines. You want to dab, okay? And that's why I use sort of a junkier brush, because you don't want to wreck a really nice, you know, acrylic or a watercolor paintbrush. You want to kind of use your junkier brushes for this kind of a job. So, you know, get your paint, dab it in there. You don't need to go crazy. Don't go too heavy, all right? Because it's just, you're going to be wiping off most of this anyway. So if you've seen any of my other videos, you know that you don't need to cover the entire blaster, but you do want to hit a few spots here and there just to add a little bit of texture, okay? Now, obviously this is not going to show as much on dark areas. It's going to show up a lot more on these lighter areas. So you see here, I'm just going right in, practically covering the whole darn thing. Don't worry, I know it looks awful, but you'll see why in a second. So you see that? See how that looks? You know, it just looks a little bit more organic when you can dab, as opposed to making brush strokes, okay? Don't do brush strokes, dab. All right? Now on armor pieces and stuff, I tend to use sea sponges, because you get a lot more coverage out of a sea sponge. But for a small like hand prop like this, you know, I can usually weather something like this in like 15-20 minutes, okay, tops. And because, you know, when you're doing stuff sometimes for film or TV productions, you need to get stuff out there pretty quick. So again, I'm just dabbing this, working this in everywhere I can. Again, focusing on those nooks and crannies, and it'll just give a lot more of like a dimensional feel. Okay, make sure you get this like ribbed area here, right? You're getting right in there, working your way around. I did a couple of tutorials. I did a weathering tutorial for the E11D blaster. That's the one the Death Trooper uses. It's much bigger. And so there's lots more surface area to cover, but you know, you always want to think about where the dirt would settle, okay? Dirt will always settle in the deeper recesses of any object. I mean, if you've ever worked on a car or motorcycle or anything like that, think about, like, you know, when you're working on the engine, like you open up the hood and it's like, where is all that dirt going? It's obviously going to go in anywhere that's kind of like a deep recess, right? And gravity will tend to pull things down. And just make it look that much more lived in, and that's kind of what the whole Star Wars universe is about, right? Making things look like they've existed there for a really, really long time. So I'm covering practically every single spot. I got not really 100% coverage, but you know, I'm just sort of hitting kind of everything. As I work my way back here, obviously you want to get into these really deep spots with the rear sight and all that. Right, so again, this ribbed area here, this sort of looks like Picatinny, or what do you call it, kind of rail for a scope or something. Okay, Now, these areas are really going to sing later when you start to highlight it with the Rub N Buff. Now, I'm not really going to weather the grip area that much. You can a little bit if you want, like just in terms of like where you think that it would be dirty. So I'm going to do a little bit, you know, I'm going to be holding, oops, sorry, I'm going to be holding the blaster, obviously. So I'm just going to be doing a little bit down here, okay? Now, I painted the grip with acrylic as well, so, but that's been dried for a couple days, so I'm not overly concerned with the paint, you know, rubbing off the grip paint or anything like that, but I'm just getting down in there, okay? So I think I've got everything covered, all right? So you can see, and some parts are already starting to dry off, okay? I'm just gonna hit this with a hairdryer real quick. And you're not trying to dry all the paint. You're just trying to dry a little bit, okay? That's it. It's like, you know, 15 seconds with the hairdryer. Now you're going to take your wet sock, okay, or terry cloth, you're going to stick your hand in there, all right? And now what you're going to do is you're going to rub off a bunch of the paint, okay? And, you know, take a look at this area here around the trigger. Can you see that? Okay. So, you know, if you clean that out, you're wiping it away, the paint will stay in the recesses and it'll look like the dirt has settled there, okay? But it'll be cleaned off in the areas that you touch the most. Now, you don't want to use your fingertip and get like into every nook, because now you're just cleaning out all the paint. Try to keep it a little bit flatter, okay? And again, don't do strokes. Try to do like a bit of a twisting or a patting motion, okay? And focus a little bit again on cleaning off areas that are raised, okay? So look, check out all the gold stuff here, okay? So again, I'm not rubbing it off like that. I'm just doing little twisting motions, okay? And look at that screw, right? So the dirt settled into that screw, okay? Check out like the, oops, sorry, the camera's kind of upside down and backwards here, but check out these areas, right? So I'm cleaning that off, and up here, just doing some twisties. Okay, and you can rotate your sock if you need to. So now you got a clean side, right? And again, you're not trying to clean it all off. You're just trying to get enough off so that it looks like it's been given a bit of a wipe down. Okay. Now the cool thing about this acrylic is that it dries to a bit of a matte finish. Okay, and that's great because you kind of want it to look like there's some spots that are cleaner than others. And then, you know, dirt is generally not shiny, okay? So for people that like clear coat their blasters with like a gloss clear afterwards, I don't really get that, because that's not what would happen in real life, okay? You don't really have, like, you know, you pick up any like old mechanics tools or something, unless you've like wiped everything off super clean, they're never clean, right? You know, any kind of machinery, stuff like that, it's not going to be clean, okay? So getting down here to the grip, I'm going to take a little bit of the stuff that I took off, right? I don't mind that some of it lives on there a little bit. I do want it to kind of show, right? But you're just, again, just taking off a bit of the highlights, okay? So that is pretty good. I'm going to clean off this trigger, inside of the trigger, the trigger itself a little bit, okay? I don't mind that there's dirt in there. I'm going to clean off that guy just a little bit right there. Okay, screw the bolt, that nut on the top should probably be a little cleaner. Again, just, you know, kind of thinking about where you're going to be touching this. I guess this is kind of like a safety lever here. So, you know, maybe you flip that up and down. So maybe this part needs to be a little cleaner, because that's where you use your thumb to like hit it, right? So again, just being kind of mindful. Like, check that out there. This gold, whatever, the cleaning rod thing. Again, I'm not cleaning off every surface. I'm trying to get stuff so that it stays in those nook and crannies, okay? The flash hider's looking really good. Okay, look at that, right? So again, I don't want to clean it all off. I want to leave some stuff there because I want that lived-in look. You also want to think about maybe there's areas that might be a little cleaner because it's going in and out of the holster all the time, right? So just thinking about that. Another spot, actually, if you haven't painted it, is maybe the inside of the muzzle or the flash hider. So I know when I know that when I spray painted this or airbrushed it, I kind of wasn't super. Oops, sorry about that. Totally out of frame there. My apologies. I wasn't super careful with focusing on the inside of that, because I think I had a stick sticking out of this to hold it up while I was painting it. So, but you can see there, you know, you just so that when you look down it, and then when you see it in photos, it's not like gray PLA or whatever. I think that's what I used, you know, to print this blaster. But there you go. That's already looking pretty good with all the dirt. Okay, you see that? And you can see a little bit more obviously on this side. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. See a little spot here I'm just going to clean up. This is taking a little longer because I'm kind of like playing to the camera and sort of showing you all the areas, but like, yeah, like I said, normally I would do this, it'd be like 15-20 minutes tops, done. Okay, so that's the weathering. Okay, really like this, how it's very much of a matte kind of finish there. Cleaning that area off a bit because, you know, okay, maybe my thumb goes there, so that should be a little cleaner. Maybe same here, you know, maybe this part's like just a little cleaner because your finger would go there. All right, so I'm just going to give this a wipe with this dry side of the cloth or your paper towel, right? And take a bit of the water off, and then I'm just going to dry it off with a hairdryer again. That's it for the dirt. All right, now we're going to move on to the highlights. And again, I'm going to be using sorry, I just got some water on the counter here. I'm going to be using this pewter Rub N Buff. Okay, so the thing to be careful with Rub N Buff is I see a lot of people really overdoing it. All right, you do not need to overdo highlights on this thing. Okay, so again, I'm using an old piece of the sock. I just wrap it around my index finger. So now I got this, you know, tool right here, just my finger. So I'm just going to squeeze a little bit of this pewter color, and I'm just going to show you on this piece of plastic here. So what I like to do is I like to kind of smush it out, so to speak. I'm sorry, there's a highlight. The light was shining on it there. You see how I'm barely getting, I'm trying to get barely any on my tool, my finger here, okay? And this is kind of a problem I see with a lot of people that do use Rub N Buff. It's like they're rubbing down the entire blaster, okay? You don't need to do that. Again, you want to focus on areas that stick out. You want to focus on areas that might get handled a lot. So, you know, like the hammer and the sight, you know, these are areas that are going to get touched by your hands, right? You know, the Mandalorian's hands. So thinking about that, go light at first. You can always add a little more. So what I like to do is I like to kind of dab. I like to just dab on. So I'm just doing that little round part there. You see that? What I like to do is I like to dab on, and then I will rub to. Instead of rub and buff, I dab and buff, okay? And you know, when there's straight lines like this, don't do the whole straight line. Just do a little bit on the corner, do a little bit on the corner, and then like leave some spots, okay? When it's a little bit more organic like that, it just looks a little bit more realistic, okay? And you don't need to highlight every single edge. That's a problem that I see, is people seem to be doing that, is like they're highlighting like every single edge, and it's like, oh, it doesn't, it's lost its realistic look, because that's not how real things in the real world wear out, okay? So this top part, I'm not going to do the whole thing. I'm going to focus a little bit more on the side. You see that there? See how that just came out? Okay, oop. So again, don't go super strong. you can always do more later. You don't need to like, you can come back and do a second pass, okay? You don't need to like go bonkers. Again, I kind of like to call it, instead of rub and buff, dab and buff, okay? It's my new motto, dab and buff. So here, just going in, can you see that? Right? Dab, dab, dab. And the dabbing is kind of nice because it's like a little more irregular, right? It won't look so just like wipey, because I don't really like that look. It doesn't look very realistic to me. That's not how things would wear in real life. These circle, whatever these are, these round things, you know, again, don't like go like that in a circle. I'm just doing some little dabs, and you can see, right, I'm just hitting these high spots, and it's capturing a lot of the detail, which is nice. Now again, I didn't spend forever doing a lot of post-processing on this blaster, because like I said, it's just a stuffer. It primarily is a stuffer and like a holster. So you're going to see some print lines that'll probably show a little bit. I'm going to be sneaky and then like not highlight this area where there's print lines visible, just to like, why highlight your mistakes, right? So, you know, on round surfaces like this, you can kind of like do a little bit more, right? And again, if you're, I can see the cloth is starting to run out a little bit, but you could see that little dab of the Rub 'n Buff. It goes a long, long way. It's going to do another little bit here on the cloth. Oops. Again, I want to smush it out or spread it out, right? So I don't want to just go straight from the tube to my fabric and then right onto the item. I want to like spread it out, make sure it's even on here first, okay? So here I'm working my way around. Let's get this bottom edge here. Okay, again, I'm not doing the whole edge. Thinking about, okay, when it fits in the holster, this area is going to get a lot more worn than this nook and cranny area, right? So just leave it, okay? You know, maybe this part gets a little bit more worn out, right? That's a nice detail there, that little sort of horseshoe shape, right? So again, a little more dab there. Dabbing on the edge. These corners. This sharp edge, obviously, I didn't get this surface earlier, right? That's a nice detail. This sort of like, I don't even know what that is. Maybe it's some sort of like spring thing underneath. That's a nice spot there. I may avoid doing the muzzle itself because I don't know, maybe I'll do a little bit on the outside, because it's like, well, if it was scorched with heat, then you wouldn't be seeing a lot of silver, right? I want to avoid putting it on the gold parts if you can, just because, you know, if you really wanted it, the gold part to be highlighted some more, then why not just use gold instead of silver? So I'm doing maybe just a little bit on the edge of this flash hider. I'm doing a little bit on this front sight. Sorry, can you see that there? The front sight. I'll move this guy. My apologies. Right there. Right. So just a bit there. Like I said, we'll come back and we'll do the buffing. I'm just trying to get kind of the material on there first. I'll leave the muzzle for now. Just going to do like a couple light dabs on the barrel. Again, not too much. This area here, it's a good spot. Okay, so you can see it's barely coming on, but I kind of like that, okay, because it'll add. Now here, this is a really nice raised area, okay, so I'm going to be doing a little bit. Now it's nice that there's hardly any registering on the cloth right now. That's okay. Again, I'm going to try to avoid that gold bolt or nut that's there. This is a nice spot, this sort of scalloped edge here. Okay, I'm running out again. Just go back to my little palette, do a little dab, 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 little smear, smear, smear. Let's get back onto that scalloped area. Try to get in a little closer right there. See that? Okay. Alright, so again, just trying to be really conscious about where things are going to wear out. So you see this trigger area. Obviously your thumb is going to be here. Maybe this side is not so worn. Maybe over here might be a little bit more. Right? Again, not trying to not go too heavy. I see a lot of people, you know, when they do the dabbing, it's like they put too much on and it's like leaving these big blobs. Okay? Just be careful, you know, just go light. You don't need to go heavy with this material. Okay, so now here, I think I'll be going a little heavier, right? Because this is like, you know, this is where your thumb, oops, sorry, this is where your thumb would be, where you're, I don't know, you're cocking the hammer back or the lever, whatever. Getting a little more on my finger. Okay. So again, just I'm trying to do edges more so than surfaces, if that makes sense, okay? Working our way around to the rear sight. So things are looking good over here. Do a little more there, a little more here. Again, I'm going a little more heavy-handed on the back end now because this is where your thumb would be touching it a lot more. Okay. Right, this part here, obviously this would get probably worn a lot because your hand is hitting it. Okay, getting a little more rubbing. But now here, there's these little, whatever they are. Oops. So I got getting a little heavy-handed with the material there. But here, definitely want to be heavier because that's your index finger. That's where you see how I'm doing like almost all the way around the edge. Again, I'm not wiping a big circle. I'm kind of dabbing. And again, just thinking about, okay, which way, my finger's probably going to hit this side more than the far side, right? So maybe there's a little bit more highlight action going on this side. Dab, dab, dab. I'm going to do this sort of under part here a little bit. Maybe that's like getting some action from the holster. Forgot the scallop on this side. So again, I'm probably taking a little longer than I normally would, just because I'm sort of explaining things as I go. I'm just going to do a little bit here. I'm not going to do not going to do a lot because I don't want it to show that much. Okay, so once, and I forgot the bottom. This is good because gotta get a little more. Because you know this is sticking out of the holster, so maybe it sees a little bit more exposure. Who knows? Maybe he like hits people with it or something. Right. So again, I've kind of only gotten, and I want to avoid the grip. Okay, so try not to get much on the grip, if any at all. Just getting some of these edges here. That's looking good. Kind of get this circle thing, right? All right. So I think it's pretty good. So now that there's very little left on my finger, okay, now I can do the rub part, okay? So and what I do is I sort of change. You know, sometimes if I want to see a little bit more of a highlight, I'll actually put some of the material on, and then if I don't, I just move my finger over and use the cloth and rub it, because this is it's a wax-based material. So when you rub it, it kind of spreads it around more, and it gives a metallic sort of sheen, right? Again, using my finger, I am using a little bit more material over here. Using other parts of the cloth if I want to take a little bit more off. I might do a little bit here along the barrel, just gently, because maybe it's like, you know, that slides in and out of the holster, kind of catches or whatever. Okay, did that muzzle area earlier. Maybe I want to see just a little more. And it's starting to look pretty good, right? Again, I don't want that sort of like highlights all over look, okay? I just want to have sort of intermittent areas be highlighted. Okay, might be a little more here. And it's a really cool material because now you're getting these kind of metallic, you know, kind of highlights. And you know, you can definitely do this with paint too. I've done this with paint on a lot of other builds. I've been asked to demonstrate the Rub N Buff for this particular one. People asked about it. Okay, so that's kind of nice, right? You see that? Like, it's just brought a little sheen to these little, whatever they are, screw things. But yeah, rubbing it really kind of works it into the material. It spreads it out, it feathers out all the edges, and it doesn't make it look like hard blobs everywhere, right? So it's like, that's it, okay? I don't want to do this big, whatever. I mean, if you really want to go and add some sheen to it, you can. I don't really feel you need to like do every single surface, because that's kind of not what Star Wars is about. Okay, I'm going to do just a little bit more on this outer part. My apologies, I don't even know what the names of I know that it's a Bergman, right? The Bergman pistol is kind of what it's based on. So you see that there? I'm just getting a little bit more. Right, got a little heavy-handed there, but that's okay. I'm going to just take that. There we go. Okay. Yeah, you know, as you rub it, it tends to be a little bit less. So you can always go back and add that sort of like second pass if you feel you need it. Okay. Got that? But you know, it's looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. Really like this area here. Okay, sorry, I'll try to play that to the camera, but it's getting some nice highlights there. I don't want to overdo it. All right, I don't want this to look like, you know, it's super ancient, like it's pulled out of the archives or something. It's like, you know, and if you look at the one that he uses in the show, it's not very beat up. So I do want to give it this a little bit of life, but I don't want to make it look like it's been through the ringer, right? That is pretty good. I'm pretty stoked about the way that looks. Okay, get that little round thing a little more. I'm going to get a little bit down here. Didn't feel like I got quite enough. There we go. Okay, but Rub N Buff, it's a really neat material. Okay, it's a really neat product to play with. Yeah, it definitely adds that kind of like blued, whatever, gun steel kind of look to things. And again, and I think this is because I chose the pewter and not the silver, the full-on silver leaf, because that one it would just be way too bright. Okay, but I mean, if you look at compare the kind of before and after pictures, like this looks pretty awesome, if I do say so myself. Just gonna highlight that a little bit, that little front sight corner a little bit, and there we go. Okay, I'm pretty happy about that. You know, it can keep working things a little bit more if you want to, but I feel pretty good about that. Okay, so like I said, this is like, for me, this is normally like a 15-minute job. Okay, and that's looking, oops, sorry, try to get that fit in the frame here. That's looking really good. You see how the light plays off that now? You see that metallic kind of, some nice, like in that corner there, it's got, or this surface, it's got some really nice, like not matte, but you know, kind of oily, dried oily browns mixed with a little bit of metallic sheen. So that's totally what I'm going for. And this area is super nice. It's worn a lot more, right? Because that's where you're be doing this a lot, right? So anyways, that is how you do it, and it's just a few materials, and like I said, it's only about 15-20 minutes work tops. Okay, so that is how you weather your Mandalorian blaster. I hope that helps you out. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.